As a scientist myself, I am so sick of hearing just follow the science blindly, and I know you guys are too. In the last couple of days, we've seen such an insane political backlash to actual scientific news, like what we talked about yesterday on the show, this new emerging link between Tylenol and a potential risk of autism. But our public trust in science is so low that stories are now emerging of women who are currently dying in the hospital in the ICU, hooked up to ventilators because they desperately needed to prove Trump wrong about Tylenol having a link to autism for their children, overdosing on acetaminophen and killing themselves and their babies in the process. It has never been more important for us to restore public trust in actual science, not the Emperor Palpatine, Dr. Fauci's of the world. And I'm so grateful that there are people in positions to do that, just like our guest today on the Isabel Brown Show, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, the director of the National Institute of Health. Dr. Bhattacharya, we are so excited to have you on the Isabel Brown Show. I shared with you just a few minutes ago, you've been one of our top requested guests, especially from young parents, because there is so much confusion about science, about what science means in the wake of the COVID pandemic and sort of the political weaponization of that. So for those who aren't scientists like I am and don't read a bunch of peer-reviewed studies all the time or keep up with PubMed, can you explain to us where we are right now and what the big changes have been here at the NIH in the last few months?
Sure. So first of all, the NIH is it's an amazing institution. Like, it has a century and more of frankly, it's the best part of government. I'm biased, I'll admit, but you know, because the reason I think that is because it's responsible for so many amazing discoveries over a century. Like, almost all of the things we know about medicine, a lot of those advances came out of this place where we're sitting. And so I just, with that kind of history behind it, you expect it to, and like actually the mission, research that improves the health and longevity of the American people. Like, who can be against that, right? Yeah. But the problem was that during the pandemic, it came to be associated essentially with all of the problems we saw. Like, you saw the lockdowns, the school closures, all of that. Even before that, the possibility that NIH contributed to the work that may have caused the pandemic, right? I mean, not intentionally to cause it, but sort of doing dangerous research. Yeah. For reasons we can probably get into in just a bit. But then the vaccine mandates and all of that. A lot of the public lost trust with the NIH. And that's just, it's a fact. I mean, we just have to deal with that fact. And where we are now is this clash between what the NIH ought to be, which is this shining institution that makes everyone healthy, like devoted to science, and then the raw facts of what happened during the pandemic, where science really just didn't do very well.
That's so well articulated, and honestly insane that we can freely have this conversation now, knowing how much backlash and censorship and confusion there has been around science. Literally yesterday, Google announced through YouTube that they did in fact cow to a lot of pressure from the last administration about censoring any sort of open dialogue related to how we treat COVID-19, how we responded to it from a public health perspective. And now, 5 years later, they're going to end up restoring a lot of those accounts.
I was in March 2021, I was in a policy roundtable organized by the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, and he asked me in that round to pull back to March 2021. Okay, so you remember the mask mandates and all the craziness around masking toddlers, 2-year-olds. The United States was the outlier. Everyone else in the world, no one was saying mask toddlers. The governor asked me on March 2021, should we mask toddlers? What's the scientific evidence? And I looked this up because I knew he was going to ask me this question. So there's none. There's literally none. Yeah. Like, it was based on nothing. And so I said to the governor, there's no good scientific evidence that we should mask toddlers. YouTube censored that video. YouTube censored the video. And so it was shocking to me how the government used its muscle during the pandemic to silence scientific discussion. The Biden administration was absolutely terrible on free speech, absolutely terrible. if science can't function without free speech,
Yeah.
it's fundamental to how science works. You should be able to disagree with me. I mean, that's good in science.
Well, that's what the scientific method is all about, right? We all learned that in elementary school in our education system in America, but I will never forget being a graduate student here at Georgetown right at the beginning of 2020 and seeing the COVID pandemic emerge, learning from some of the top people here at the NIH and the FDA and the WHO in public health response, and being told in my classroom from so many of these educated scientists, there's something really wrong here. We've never responded to a disease this way ever. This social distancing concept, the lockdown concept, the masking
Isabel,
concept.
you remember plexiglass?
Yes, it was insane. I mean, priests were shooting super soaker water guns to baptize your child in church because that was the science and you weren't allowed to question anything.
That's when church was allowed to open. Though.
Exactly. Eventually, yeah, years and years down the line. But it was so confusing to me as someone who had been trained as a scientist to ask all of the big questions about how something works, never arrive at the conclusion before you see all of the evidence. Yeah. But we had inversed that entire process and silenced and censored people like yourself in the process. So that obviously spurred some action in you and wanting to get more involved. Walk us through what that looked like for you.
Well, I mean, it's surreal to be sitting as the director of the NIH. The former director kind of went after me pretty viciously.
Yep.
Not the Francis Collins, not the immediate former one. It's I don't know how else to explain it other than there's something about the way God uses the people. It's just completely unexpected. But to me, it's a huge obligation that I can restore the NIH to what it should be. We have to in order to do that, we have to change the problems, change the things that led to the problems of the pandemic, and then double down on the things that the NIH we know can do well, right? The fundamental research that advances knowledge that translates over to better health for people, right? So that's what we have to do to restore trust. I mean, you asked me earlier, like a few things that we've done. Essentially pausing all dangerous gain-of-function research. Right, the kind of research that likely led to the pandemic. The whole idea of the dangerous gain-of-function research was sold to as a way of preventing all pandemics. Mm-hmm. We just go out into the wild places, get a virus or whatever, bring it into the lab, manipulate it so it's more dangerous to humans. Where the idea was like, how many evolutionary steps do you need before you can make the virus more transmissible in humans, right? And if it's very few, well, that virus is a high risk. If it's a lot, you bring the virus in, it takes a lot to do it, then that virus is low risk. And then you prepare vaccines in advance for the viruses that are high risk. The problem with that idea is that you get like, this is crazy, but like you make vaccines in advance that have never been tested on humans. Mm-hmm. And then when the virus makes the leap, you're ready, right? But you're not ready because those vaccines have never been tested on humans. You don't know they're going to work. And then the other thing is like evolution happens, and so the virus that actually makes the leap may look very different than the one that you studied in the lab. And then of course there's the possibility of lab leaks. So I was really delighted when the president signed an executive order, said no more dangerous gain of function, and we've been working on a regulatory framework with the White House to make sure that this never happens again.
That's fantastic.
It's a huge advance. The president signed an executive order, I think on day one, saying restoring free speech. And so I put in place these. Okay, this is going to sound crazy to you, but this was crazy to me. It turned out that you needed, at the NIH, there's a huge amount of internal scientists. They needed to get permission from above before they can send their scientific papers out for publication. I thought like I got to be a Stanford professor for a long time. I never had to get permission until the pandemic, but that's another story. Academic freedom means that scientists are going to be able to publish things that I disagree with as the director. That's a good thing, right? And so I put in place a policy that says, if you're a scientist here at the NIH, you have a scientific result you believe in, you can send it out for publication. You don't need to get my permission or your supervisor's permission. And there's a whole host of things, but like, I think that's the beginning of how you restore trust. Like, put regulation of things that we should not be doing, dangerous gain-of-function work. We shouldn't be taking existential risks on behalf of the American people or the world population without like extensive regulation, and then restore free speech.
I'm so glad you're talking about this bioethical conversation, because this is something we cover a lot on our show. My audience knows I'm a scientist by education, but these days I talk more a lot about science rather than participate in it. But something that's been really puzzling to me over the past few years is the idea that we've just gotten so out of control with research, with clinical implementation of different scientific methods, that we don't even stop to ask the question, just because we can, should we? Has there been any research here at the NIH that has been alarming to you since coming in as the director on, hey, other than gain of function research maybe, why are we doing this? There's a lot more potential negative side effects than positive benefits.
Well, I'll give you one that's like got a lot. It's a politically hot potato, but I think I still am puzzled how this happened. The NIH is excellent at science, right? It's excellent at doing fundamental biology. It's excellent at doing clinical research. And should be better at taking that clinical research and figuring out ways to get it to the American people better, right? So those are the things we're good at. For a long time, it turns out the NIH, a part of its portfolio included DEI. Essentially, the goal, rather than the mission of the NIH, which is research that advances the health and longevity of the American people, there was an additional mission added on that was never articulated, that we were going to somehow solve these social justice problems that we're not really equipped to solve. We're scientists. We don't do that. We can't. There's nothing that we can do that will establish utopia on Earth. What we can do is like discover new things that make people healthier, maybe help them live longer, live more lives where you don't have to worry about all the chronic diseases or the acute conditions. I mean, those are things we can potentially do to establish, social justice. And it perverted the way we think about science, right? It made it more difficult because in social justice, people have very, very strong feelings. You can't test it empirically, right? So, like, I suppose I believe that the world is systemically racist, right? And it has been for its history. Okay. Well, how do you empirically test that idea and the impact? Let's say you think that that's the reason why certain groups are very unhealthy. How do you empirically test that? You can't run the world a second time.
Yeah.
You can't get a control group. It's not something where it's in our capacity to do. And so we've worked to remove a lot of that from our portfolio. It's been painful because, when you tell scientists go do something, they'll try to do something. But that something, I think, hasn't actually translated over to better health for minorities. If you go back the last decade and a half, there's been no real increase in life expectancy for minorities, actually for almost all Americans. There's some flat life expectancy. It hasn't translated over to better health for most of the population. And what it's done is it's just politically divisive with no real benefit to show for it. And so I think what the NIH ought to be is something that's it's an institution devoted to its mission, right? Do research that advances health, and leave the politics aside. Just remove it from and that's what we've been working on, is trying to get a portfolio of research projects that really are science, that really have the potential to advance health of every American, minority, non-minority. It doesn't matter who you are. I want the research we do to really help you. And fighting, using science as a cover to fight crazy social justice political fights, it just harms the NIH.
Since becoming a mom, my skin has been completely out of whack. My hormones are all over the place, and it's really started looking tired and dull, mainly from all of the sleepless nights that I'm still getting and the nonstop work that we've had for the last few months to get the show up and running. I was honestly getting really frustrated trying so many different products that just weren't working, and knowing that I can't use so many products because I'm breastfeeding my daughter. That's why I discovered Boncharge and their red light face mask, and wow, it has been a total game changer for me and my family. Boncharge is an amazing wellness brand that creates science-backed products using ancestral wisdom coupled with cutting-edge research. Their red light face mask has become my sacred self-care me time. I use it for just 10 to 20 minutes while I'm watching the news, doing show research, writing a paper for school because I am that much of a glutton for punishment, or even while putting my daughter Isla to bed. It is super lightweight, it doesn't get too hot, and it uses both red light and near-infrared light to boost boost collagen and elastin production. My husband even has a tendency to steal it from time to time, though he'll never tell you that himself. What sets Boncharge apart is that they actually removed the circadian and sleep-disrupting blue and green light that the other brands keep in their masks, so you can actually still get a good night of sleep once you fall asleep at night. Plus, it has zero EMF radiation and zero flicker. Since using it, I have noticed a noticeable difference in my skin. My skin is glowing again, and those tired new mom fine lines are non-existent. Plus, it is backed by over 4,000 peer-reviewed studies with zero negative side effects. Actual science, which we love to see. Don't just take my word for it. Try it yourself. Go to boncharge.com and use coupon code Isabel to save 15% off. That's BONCHARGE.com. Coupon code Isabel for 15% off. I am not surprised to hear you say that, although I think the average public American might be surprised to hear you say we should leave the politics out of science, especially this week. I'm seeing a lot in the media about how President Trump and Secretary Kennedy and yourself and other people here involved in the science aspect of the administration are using politics to push a political agenda and using science to push a political agenda, particularly at this intersection of Tylenol and autism and how the media is treating that. There's been a lot that's happened in the last 48 hours or so, but let's remove the politics for a second, back up, and can you explain from a scientific perspective where this is really coming from?
Sure. Actually, so it turns out that if you go back 10 years, there were early reports that women who take Tylenol during pregnancy, especially late in pregnancy, their children after birth are more likely to have some neurodevelopmental conditions, like ADHD, autism. Now, there's a fight in the scientific literature, as always is, between how much of that effect is, right? Some people think it's a tiny effect, but does on the positive side, hard to detect. Other people think it's larger. Right, and there was that fight going on in 2016, 17. There were like news reports about this. About this literature. That literature has gone on. There's been a lot of interest in it scientifically, but it never got to the sort of attention of the public after that big burst in 2016, 2017. Recently, there was a study published by some researchers at Harvard University and at Mount Sinai University in New York, Mount Sinai Medical School in New York, and the researchers concluded, and this included the dean of public health at Harvard, that this literature supported a cautious stance toward using Tylenol when you're pregnant. And now I can understand the reason for the cautious stance because, if you have a high fever and you're pregnant, that can hurt your baby. So, and you don't want to leave that alone. And Tylenol may be the only way to do that in that case. On the other hand, there are situations where people take Tylenol and maybe they don't have to. I mean, they could have other ways of managing the problems that Tylenol is supposed to deal with, right? And so what the researchers concluded when they did this review of the literature, where there was like I said, there's a big fight, is that prudent medicine says take the lowest possible dose for the shortest amount of time. Think carefully before you use it, because there might be this side effect. There's a big fight over whether it actually causes the rise in autism or it's just associated with, and there's other things. In my view, that scientific fight I don't think is yet resolved. But I think I have an obligation to tell people when there is this finding that can help guide people's decisions. You should know when you're pregnant that there is this fight going on in the scientific literature about Tylenol.
That sounds so reasonable. That's so shocking to me that this is such a reasonable conversation.
I don't understand it. I have a theory. Okay, so let me go back to the pandemic. You remember June 2020? You probably weren't paying attention. You didn't have kids yet, but I was paying careful attention because my kids were in school then. June 2020, everyone, a whole bunch of scientists looked at what happened in Sweden with the opening of schools. The Swedes never closed their schools for kids under 16, and the evidence was that the teachers were at the same risk as other workers in the economy, not higher risk, and that the kids got to have school. They got to go to school. They got to have a normal life. Yeah, and you can see it in the numbers now. The Swedish kids have no increase in depression and anxiety. There's no learning loss. The Swedes do not hurt their kids. That evidence was in by June 2020. And so like people are saying, let's open schools. Then, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, right? They're let's open schools. Then President Trump has a press conference where he says, well, we should open schools. And then the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, changes their mind shortly after the president, based on no scientific evidence, because scientific evidence already by June of 2020 was clear that closing schools in spring of 2020 was a mistake. It was only, as best I can tell, the only thing that changed was the president said we should open schools. And somehow whatever the president says is, for some group of people, is automatically wrong. He was more scientifically right than AAP was. I can't speak like the president. I'm not. I'm never going to. I'm a geeky scientist, right? So I'm never going to be like him. But when he goes and tells people, I mean, I was standing there right next to him in that press conference. He says, don't take it unless you need to. Isn't that exactly what I said?
Yes, just a little bit louder, perhaps, with his style of speaking. And that's the part that's just been baffling me these last 48 hours, because what's really unfortunate is that this isn't just silly clickbait headlines or ridiculous posts on social media. This is actually impacting people's health now. This has turned into a TikTok viral challenge of these pregnant women who are basically downing bottles of Tylenol to try to prove Trump wrong that it won't cause autism. This morning, I came across several stories of women who have overdosed from acetaminophen, and they are now on ventilators in the hospital, and likely them and their children, their babies, are going to die because of this. That's why I think this restoration of public trust in science is so important, because this really has nothing to do with President Trump or whoever is sitting in the Oval Office. This is just belief in objective medicine and science, right?
Yeah. No, exactly. I saw some of those reports. Tylenol, it's an over-the-counter drug, but it's probably the most dangerous over-the-counter drug. It's very easy to overdose and make your liver basically kaput with it. So you got to be careful with it regardless. There's cumulative overdoses also. Like if you take too much over a relatively short period of time, it doesn't have to be just the whole bottle. It can be like you can build up toxicity in your liver and actually kill your liver. And so baseline, like doctors will when they're talking about Tylenol, will say, be careful with it. The president is just saying, be careful with it in pregnancy, especially. It's heartbreaking to watch people they take such risks with their health simply for like narrow political points. I mean, in medicine, we're supposed to do no harm, and I've seen doctors, pregnant women doctors who like are on TikTok taking it when they don't need it. Like it just blows my mind. I feel like it's a poisoning of medicine with politics in a way that just it should never happen.
While we're asking all of the right questions about how to keep kids safe, I think it's important we ask some more questions too. If you could go back in time and stop the Holocaust, would you? If you could rescue even one person from the worst atrocities in human history, would you? Think about this. You can do a version of that today. Every single day in America, more than 3,000 babies are aborted. Someday, history will look back on this as the single biggest genocide in human history, a genocide of our children, because right now, 1 in 4 pregnancies in our country is ending in abortion. Unlike the past, you can do something about this today. The Preborn Network clinics are on the front lines, meeting women in their darkest hour, loving them and helping them to choose life. This year alone, over 38,000 babies have already been rescued from the horrors of abortion. And it starts with just an ultrasound, that simple moment where a mother sees her baby that's a total game changer. It literally doubles a baby's chance at life when mom gets to see her baby on the screen. I will never forget watching my daughter Isla wave at me from our very first ultrasound around 10 or 11 weeks and seeing every single bone in her feet and her hands, knowing that this was my daughter, not just a random clump of cells, but a beautiful baby worthy of every single protection that we could possibly give her. So let me ask you again, if you could, would you? You can, right now. For just $28, you can provide a life-saving ultrasound to a mom in need. Go to preborn.com/Isabel. That's preborn.com/Isabel, or dial pound 250 on your phone and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 with the keyword baby. Together, we can end this tragedy of abortion, one mother, one baby at a time. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head that just because it happened to come out while this administration is in political power here, there's obviously going to be a natural response to that, which is unfortunate, but is systematic of the society that we live in today. And I'm starting to see a little bit of that associated with many of the other initiatives championed by Secretary Kennedy and the Department of Agriculture. I know we just brought on Dr. Ben Carson as a nutrition advisor, which is fantastic, and I'm very excited to see that. What potential backlash are you guys anticipating when it comes to some of these new initiatives, and what are some of the next initiatives that are going to come out of the NIH here?
Well, backlash. I hope none, because I think they make sense. So like one big initiative that I've been working on, I'll just do two of them. So but let's do the first one. So okay, I have to do some background on this. It turns out that a lot of the scientific papers that are published, peer-reviewed, published, even in top journals, when independent scientists look at the same question, they don't find the same answer. Now, we've known this for decades. When I was a med student 5 million years ago, because I'm old, my favorite professor would tell me, look, Jay, half of what you're learning is not true. And I was like, as a young med student, I'm like, wait, what do you mean? Which half is not true? And you said, like, look, science is difficult. Like, if you have some knowledge about something, it's very often the case that the thing that when other people look at the same thing, they're going to find a different answer. And it's absolutely true. Like, when I was a med student, the ulcers were not caused by bacteria. You're scientists, they're caused by bacteria. But when I was a med student in the ancient days, it was not caused by. The treatment for ulcers was like stop drinking coffee, and sometimes they do surgery to like cut off your recurrent vagus nerve. Like they literally would do surgery. Anyways, enough about the old times. But the point is that like that thing I learned in med school wasn't true. That was in part because of a new discovery. But it's also the case that a lot of what scientific papers that are published, they're just not true. And it's true. That's because science is hard. Like, I think something is true. The publication process, first, if it's a negative result, you can't get it published. A null result is very hard to publish. And even positive results, I can convince myself I'm right.
Yeah.
I can even be very persuasive in the scientific literature that I'm right, get it published. But if you were to do another look at it yourself, independent of me, maybe you won't find the same thing. That's really common in science. So it's called a replication crisis. I think the NIH should solve that. Right now, what happens is you have authority. I published in a top journal, therefore I'm right.
Yep.
I'm an NIH director or a fancy Stanford professor or something, and therefore I'm right? But that's not what the basis of truth is in science, right? What the basis of truth is that other people looking at the same thing find the same answer, or very similar answers. Looking at it from a different point of view, get the same answer. There's this idea of consilience, like other people, everyone looking at it together, looking at it in different ways, find the same answer. That's how we know the world is round.
Well, that's how something is supposed to be peer-reviewed, right, ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, peer review by itself, by the way, is not, that's actually a narrow process, right? So, like, I peer-reviewed thousands, I've lost count of how many, it's some crazy number of papers, and no one ever gives me the data I just read the paper and see if it doesn't make logical sense, but I don't actually replicate what they did. Peer review it's necessary, but it's not sufficient to establish truth. And so with the NIH, we can solve that problem. That's one working on. Like, let's make people who do replication, let's have them have the honored place in science they deserve. Right now, you can't make a career out of it. We can fix that, the NIH. Let's have a place to publish those results, those negative results, the replication studies, and link them back. So you do a search for a paper, instead of, it's published in the New England Journal of Medicine, it must be true. No, there'll be a replication button. You click the replication button, and all the relevant replication research to that paper comes up, summarized, so you can click and see each one, and see, do other people looking at the same thing find the same answer? Let's make that the basis of truth in science. I think so I'm really excited about that. So we're gonna fix the replication crisis. Again, a very geeky thing, but
No, it's important actually, because I think there is that assumption even in the scientific community. If it's in a journal, then it's true. If it's in a journal, I can trust it. And that is especially shoved in front of the faces of medical school students who think if anything is outside of the realm of this peer-reviewed literature that I'm constantly reading, then it can't possibly be true. And everything that is in front of my face here, I have to be able to trust.
yeah, I think, let's go back to the pandemic. A lot of the reporting that you would see was so biased. It's because they would talk to a couple of experts, who had a particular view. Lockdowns are good, school closures are good, mask mandates are good, vaccine mandates are good, and they would point to some New England Journal piece or something, or Science or Nature piece, and say, "Oh, well, look, here's evidence." But that's not evidence. Evidence is, yeah, that piece is fine, but you have to have other people looking at the same thing to find the same answer, right? Let's train scientists to use replication as the basis of truth. Let's have it, make it easy for reporters to go and see, not is it New England Journal, but like click the replication button in the search engine and see, do other people find the same thing?
In the spirit of actual science, we are so excited to be partnering with Balance of Nature supplements here on the show. Their supplements are the result of years of research and development, and they regularly test their products using independent third-party laboratory analysis. Their ingredients are 100% whole fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers. Their fruits and veggies supplement includes 31 colorful ingredients of 16 whole fruits and 15 whole vegetables, including mangoes, pineapples, blueberries, bananas, mushrooms, wheatgrass, kale, pepper, broccoli, the whole nine. And their fiber and spice supplement is the only one on the market that combines 12 amazing spices and 4 whole fibers. Even those of us with a really solid routine and who take what we eat very seriously, most of us still don't get enough variety of fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers. In fact, more than 90% of Americans actually still don't meet the recommended intake of dietary fiber every single day. You can take their fruits and veggies supplements with water, you can chew them, or just open them up and mix the powder into your favorite food and drinks. It's super convenient and there's no mess. And the fiber and spice supplement can be mixed with water or your favorite drink as well. Balance of Nature's goal is to deliver natural goodness of ingredients of fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers, just as nature intended. You can go to balanceofnature.com and use promo code Isabel for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer. Plus, you'll get a free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Isabel. I'm glad you brought up vaccine mandates because I would love to ask you about this. One of the biggest questions we're getting from our community right now is from young moms like myself. I have a 5-month-old at home who are just shocked at the childhood and infant vaccine schedule. It is certainly not the one that we grew up with. And I'll be honest, as a scientist myself, I was flabbergasted that my child was supposed to receive 6 vaccines in her first visit at just a few weeks old at the pediatrician's office. There's been a lot of conversation in our country, and especially in this administration, about whether or not that is the appropriate path to take forward. Are we expecting any major changes to the childhood vaccine schedule? And tell us a little bit about some of the announcements that have come out in the last few days.
Sure. So first, that's not the NIH. That's the CDC, right? So that's the somebody else, not me, but I've been watching very carefully and closely. Okay, a couple of things about this. So first of all, let's talk about mandates, because I think a lot of people get this confused, right? So you don't need a mandate to encourage people to take a vaccine that's worth taking. A mandate means you can't send your kid to school unless you have exactly the schedule. Right? That if you don't do exactly what the CDC recommends, then your kid doesn't get to go to school. That's what a mandate is. Essentially denying kids education if they don't agree with the CDC schedule. You don't need a mandate to encourage parents to give vaccines that where the scientific evidence is really, really good. You just don't. Like, you look at the UK has no mandate. They have very high uptake of the measles vaccines and all the other standard vaccines. Scandinavia, like neither Norway nor Sweden, have a vaccine mandate. Yet their uptake of vaccines is very, very high because people in public health are honest with parents about what they think is really good. And they'll tell you the scientific evidence. They'll allow a debate and discussion, and ultimately science wins. Right? People are convinced by good evidence. I happily vaccinated my children with the MMR vaccine, the DPT vaccine, polio. These are like important vaccines in my view. Yeah. And I think the scientific evidence, of course, there's side effects for some cases, and we have to acknowledge that, but they're rare enough, and the benefits are so great that I'm glad that I did it. And now if I different. Maybe I would think differently if my kid had unfortunately had one of the side effects, right? So we have to acknowledge both, but that kind of conversation leads to public trust in public health and ultimately leads to the right outcome, right? So like you don't need the mandate to get high levels of vaccination in kids because when the scientific evidence points in that direction. The mandate happens because of a failure in public health. The public health, basically people have lost trust in public health, and now the only way we can get you to do what we want is by forcing you, by threatening your kid's education if you don't if you don't comply, right? So I think that's just as a baseline of where we are, that's just to start. As far as the schedule itself, I don't know what the right schedule is. Let's just say up front. I don't know. I look at like the Danish schedule, many fewer vaccines than the American schedule. Just looks like it's just chock full, as you say, multiple vaccines within a short period of
I believe I counted 5 COVID boosters until quite recently, when that has now changed the recommendation before your child turns 2. I mean, it's crazy.
It was unique in the world. In the United States, was the only country that was essentially recommending COVID boosters for children under 6 months and above. No other country on earth was doing that. And I look at the evidence on that. Frankly, I don't understand what some of my scientist colleague friends are thinking, right? The harm from COVID infection in babies is very limited. Now, I'm not saying you can't have bad outcomes. You absolutely could, right? But on the other hand, the evidence that the vaccine stops you from getting COVID or stops your child from getting COVID, there isn't any randomized. In fact, all of the randomized evidence in children as young as 6 months only asks whether the COVID booster increases antibody levels. It doesn't ask if it prevents death. This is the randomized evidence. If it doesn't ask if it prevents hospitalizations, there's non-randomized evidence, but it's frankly, this is what I do for a living. Is I do observational data analysis. I just don't I think it's not high quality outcomes. So and then on the flip side, there's the possibility of side effects for kids young men we know have high rates of myocarditis after the booster and after the COVID vaccine. So on balance, why would you recommend it for 6 months? Most 6-month-olds, and most of the world agrees, right? So, and yet the CDC put it on this childhood vaccine schedule. Like your child is probably going to, I don't know which pediatrician you have, but they're probably going to go tell you when your child is 6 months old that they should get the COVID booster. Again, on the basis of sort of very mixed evidence. On the other hand, the MMR vaccines, I think that every parent should have their kid, unless there's some very, very special circumstance, every parent should have their kid vaccinated with it. Now, part of the compact here is that if I make these kind of recommendations, that I'm committed to studying the side effects and then honestly saying what they are. Yep. And then, working to find better versions of the vaccines so that they have fewer side effects, right? So, something that the CDC just recently did, this ACIP, this advisory committee for immunization practices did at the CDC. They used to have a recommendation of taking the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella, and combining it with chickenpox. They call the MMRV vaccine, varicella, as the chickenpox. And there was some evidence that when you combine it in this way, the rate of seizures in infants is higher. It's not a huge increase, but it's why give your kids seizures, right? Instead, so what they recommended is to split out the MMR vaccine from the varicella vaccine. Completely reasonable. They're following the scientific evidence and with the aim toward reducing the side effects. Yeah. And somehow it gets painted as anti-vax. I don't understand. It seems to me if you're truly pro-vax, you're doing honest research on the side effects, telling people when you find them, and replacing the vaccines that have elevated side effects with other vaccines potentially, and then always reevaluating, right? So your kid is not going to need the smallpox vaccine. I got smallpox when I was a kid. It was still a disease that was still floating around the world. 1979 was the last case of diagnosed smallpox on Earth. And no one has had the smallpox vaccine in the United States in decades because why would you? The benefits are zero. Yeah. and there's still potential harm.
That nuance, I think, is so important. And this blanket reaction and very emotionally driven backlash of everything is anti-vax or everything is pro-vax, and that can transcend vaccines too. I think just across the public health spectrum today has really been such a characteristic of our modern culture right now, largely driven by the media. So in our last couple of minutes together, I'm hopeful to see if you have any recommendations for the average person who doesn't like to sit there and read PubMed articles and peer-reviewed studies like we do. But how can people find that nuance themselves and actually know what they're reading is trustworthy?
Yeah, I mean, I think, of course, you should read all the PubMed articles you possibly can. I mean, it is hard, right? And I think we just need to. It would be so much easier if our culture were a little bit different, right? So, like, think about follow the science. You know, those yard signs that people have in this house. What we believe in
trust science,
or whatever it is, right? So, that is a reflection of a sort of elevating science to the position of an idol. It's no longer subject to rational discussion. It's taken over your hindbrain. It's like and you're like, you put your faith in it, as opposed to being something where you can reason around. I'm not saying that faith and reason are in conflict, but what I mean is that it's the worst version of that, right? If our culture shifts to have science in its proper place, where it's a place where we reason together about the physical world works. It sometimes translates over into things that we can do that makes our lives better, healthier. Our kids healthier. We can give us good advice about what to eat, what's good to eat, and what's not good to eat. What kind of exercise to do. All this stuff that everyone asks about and wants to know. That culture would make it so much easier for people to make those decisions. Right now, you have to go hunt around, and it's very easily to get misled unless you have a lot of background. And I think if we, this is my hope about the NIH. It's not all of science, but part of science. I can help make our scientific culture healthier by restoring free speech, by restoring science to its proper place, as a way to advance our knowledge about health and to really make our lives healthier and better. It'll be much easier for people to make informed decisions. Because you won't have to ask what the motives are. You can just click the replication button, metaphorically, and then just know.
Yeah, you'll have perfect public trust, which is exactly what our goal should be in science always. Dr. Bhattacharya, thank you so much for taking some time out of your very busy schedule here at the NIH. This campus is amazing, and I know our audience is very excited to hear from you, and we'll have to have you back on the show soon.
Isabel, so nice to see you.
Awesome.
Yep.
We love Dr. J. Please, please, please keep up with his work here at the NIH and across the board in the scientific community when it comes to the Trump administration. I know you guys want us to interview everybody else working on all of these fronts, and we are on it right here in Washington, D.C. But until then, make sure you're subscribed to the channel wherever you're listening so that you catch the next episode of The Isabel Brown Show. Go read actual PubMed articles. I promise they're not that bad. See you guys tomorrow.